Shucks, and kiss my ass.
And we are going to be talking Deep Blue Sea 2. Yes, this movie may be a surprise to some, but there is now a sequel, sort of, to the original Deep Blue Sea. A movie which some consider the best shark movie outside of the original Jaws. So, this one is directed by Darren Scott, who has done a number of kind of TV movies and TV shows. Now, I say it's sort of a sequel because this is more of a remake than a sequel. Now, to kind of demonstrate what I mean by that, if you saw the, I think it's 2011 Fright Night remake, okay, and then I believe it was 2013 they released a sequel to that, which was once again more or less a remake, but just kind of a few kind of like on the surface changes, and that is kind of like this basically. So it is really just a remake of the original Deep Blue Sea movie, more or less the same plot, more or less the kind of the same character archetypes, but just a few kind of changes here and there. Now, when I see critiques for this film going to be coming up, I would imagine that this is going to be the thing that people focus on and probably knock the movie down for because of that. But I'm going to have a look, I mean, we're going to discuss that, but we'll be having a look at how the movie stands up on its own merits as well, because some people may not have seen Deep Blue Sea 1 and kind of just watched this as a get-go, but it ultimately is a remake. It doesn't really kind of appear to be in the same universe as the original movie, and it more or less follows the same plot, so you wouldn't imagine this thing literally happening twice in the kind of the same universe with the more or less the kind of exactly the kind of the same outcome. So to give you an idea, essentially it is a kind of a research facility out in the ocean that is doing testing on sharks. In this instance, they are basically testing an intelligence enhancing drug, and they want to kind of experiment on the sharks. The reason I got to say is quite flimsy. The guy who's behind it thinks AI is going to take over the world, and the reason for doing this kind of drug is to give humans the upper hand. So you may be a little bit kind of think, whoa, that sounds a little bit cheesy. And yes, this movie does go in some cheesy territory, so we'll come on to it. Now, as probably you can guess, things go awry. The sharks are now far more intelligent than anyone can anticipate and decide they are going to turn on their former prison wardens, I guess you would say, and get revenge ultimately. The twist here, I would say, or not twist, the point of difference is these are bull sharks rather than mako sharks, which we had in the original. And I guess the only other main difference is that the extra element this one adds is our main shark, if you like, our kind of like alpha shark, is pregnant, and she kind of gives birth to these kind of like school of little sharks, which basically act as kind of like a school of piranhas, basically, and kind of just gives that extra element. So they are more the kind of the smaller juvenile sharks in the kind of the base, whilst the bigger ones are on the outside. And it's up to this kind of small group of scientists and workers at this facility to obviously see if they can escape, and along the way there's various kind of like, you know, finger pointing at different people and stuff like that. So it really is the kind of the same plot, and you really do have the kind of the same sort of characters. You know, obviously we have the kind of the hunky shark wrangler. We have the scientific woman like we did in the first one. Her character is slightly different in this one. She's more of a protagonist than an antagonist like the original movie. But nonetheless, they're kind of, and you got a bunch of cannon fodder as well. So how does this movie rate on its own? Okay, now this was a made-for-TV movie, I believe, and I would say that this is really to be fair, a step up from a lot of the kind of the TV movies. Now, obviously, I think the go-to things you can think of are the other kind of cheap shark movies that you may have got. Yes, I know kind of Sharknado is really just a kind of a parody, but there are a bunch of kind of like you know, made-for-TV shark movies, spring-bait shark attack, stuff like that, basically. And I've got to say the production value on this, although still on the cheaper side, nowhere near the budget of the original movie, I was still impressed with kind of like the flooded sets and stuff like that, and these actors obviously walking around in kind of like, you know, chest-high water and stuff like that. So there is some production value here with all these kind of like flooded sets and things like that. So it does kind of look like this place is genuinely flooding. So I did appreciate that, and I actually kind of liked our locations, or the sets, I should say, of this kind of underground facility. Although the set above water looks way too small compared to obviously what it is down underwater, and I appreciate obviously, you know, probably you only see the tip, but it just looks too small at the top. The actual sharks themselves are a mixed bag. In some shots they look quite good. There are a couple of money shots here, particularly where we have some of the shark attacks themselves. I have to say the sharks do look quite good. One in particular scene, probably the final money shot, I would say, it does look really good. And there are a couple of others as well, but there are elements here where the sharks, especially when you kind of see them swimming along, don't look particularly well rendered, don't look particularly well animated, and the kind of just a little bit kind of really obviously CGI. Also, the actual sharks, the mini sharks, the baby sharks, go way too silly. I mean, they're represented by kind of like bubbles in the water and this kind of mess and this kind of weird set of like chattering sound that again is just silly. It's just silly, and kind of obviously it's just to kind of give you this visual clue that these sharks are under the water and stuff, and people are going, oh, what's that? And they can hear all these sharks kind of going, and they're just a bit silly, to be honest with you. And then that leads me into my next point, silliness. This movie is way silly compared to the first one. I mean, the dialogue in this movie is so cheesy. It really is very, very cheesy, and the characters are, although I would say they actually, acting-wise, I don't think it's too bad, but the actual dialogue that they're saying is super cheesy, but it's delivered okay, if that makes sense. So don't be expecting any kind of Oscar-worthy dialogue in this movie. And some of the stuff that they say, just thinking, oh God, that was kind of painful. I mean, if this came out in the 90s, that sort of dialogue would be perfectly acceptable, I feel. But nowadays, I don't know, it just seems very kind of like typical kind of action movie, very kind of trite. There are some kind of fun action sequences. In regards to the kind of the deaths, there are a couple of good ones, but a lot of it is off screen, and you'll just see kind of like bubbling water and stuff like that, particularly in regards to the baby sharks. They just, you know, they kind of swarm you, and you never really see any type of actual wounds being inflicted. There's one fairly good kind of prosthetic shot, sort of aftermath if you like, but again, it's just kind of like getting to kind of really cut the budget here. Actual attacks do seem a little bit sparse, to be quite honest with you. There are a couple of exceptions, and there are some fairly strong scenes of gore, but they are, to the amount of people that are getting attacked, they're on the lesser side, if that makes sense. A lot of the time you'll just see kind of like frothing water and stuff like that, and people you assume obviously are being kind of eaten in the kind of mess. But there are a couple of instances when you do see gore shots, and I will say the gore shots are effective. This movie, I would say, seems a little bit more compact than the original movie. I didn't look at the running times, to be fair, but it kind of moves on at a bit of a faster pace, I would say, than maybe the original one. But again, that kind of maybe suffers in regards to some of the character development because of that. And the characters here, like I've said, they are not badly acted, but I feel they're written very thinly. You know, the motivations, especially from our kind of like, you know, the guy who's in charge of this kind of like undersea place, is just very, very silly and very, very kind of cheesy. And our kind of shark wrangler guy, it's all kind of like, you know, macho machismo and stuff like that. And the scientists are very one note. There's not a lot of depth to them, unfortunately. But I've got to say, this movie still was entertaining. If you have seen the original, you're not going to be missing out anything by not seeing this. But I guess you can just, I don't really understand. I mean, the effects look better in the original. The original movie is better really in every kind of way. But it isn't bad. It isn't as bad as you can probably would think. And I think people will probably just jump on this movie because it is a remake and then just kind of don't really look at it for its own merits. And although I never feel this movie rises above the kind of the original movie in any way, it certainly could have been a lot worse. And I do feel this is probably better than a lot of the kind of like the TV movies that you would have seen on the kind of the feature sharks, of which there have been many. So if you can kind of separate yourself from the original kind of film and you just watch it as a kind of a strange, unnecessary remake, then you may still find a lot to enjoy here because it is fun. You know, it moves at a good pace. There are some great effect shots, both practical and kind of a few instances where the sharks do look pretty good. And you know, maybe they could have done a little bit more with it. Maybe could have changed it a little bit. I would have liked to have seen an actual sequel rather than what I consider probably an unnecessary remake. I mean, maybe someone could have picked up the technology and stuff like that. And it seems a bit of a waste having bull sharks and not have them go into freshwater, which is kind of the thing that bull sharks really are kind of known for. There you go. Anyway, it's certainly not bad compared to the, you know, a lot of creature features, but doesn't kind of touch that original one, doesn't really kind of better it in any type of way. But obviously the budget is a lot lower. So I'm going to give this movie a 6 out of 10. It's an okay shark film. If you like shark films and you can kind of separate your love of the original, then give it a shot. I think you'll probably find it fun but flawed. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.